When Robert Downey Jr. heard the words, "spare some change," he could not resist them, but stop. Among the buzz of activity, he decided to do the most generous act that left onlookers amazed. The bitter December wind sliced through Aldridge Square like shattered glass, forcing pedestrians to hunch their shoulders and quicken their pace as they navigated the glittering holiday displays of downtown Westbrook. Among the sea of cashmere coats and designer boots, Emmett Thorne remained stationary, a human island weathered by years of neglect and hardship. His fingerless gloves, once black, now faded to an indeterminate gray, clutched a cardboard sign with letters that bled in the light mist. "Anything helps. God bless." The message was as worn as the man himself, whose lined face told stories of a life derailed by circumstances both within and beyond his control. But today, amid the holiday shoppers and tourists, Emmett sensed something different in the air, something beyond the impending snowstorm that meteorologists had been warning about for days. He couldn't have known that his encounter with fame would transform not just his afternoon, but potentially the trajectory of his remaining years. The crowd pulsed and shifted like a living organism, parting suddenly as security personnel cleared a pathway from the gleaming entrance of the Pinnacle, Westbrook's most exclusive hotel, to an idling black Escalade with windows tinted to near opacity. Whispers rippled through the throng of onlookers, the electric current of celebrity detection charging the atmosphere. Emmett paid little attention. He'd witnessed similar spectacles before and knew that the excitement rarely translated to generosity toward men like him. He adjusted his position on the cold concrete, wincing at the familiar ache in his left knee, a souvenir from his construction days before the accident that set his life spiraling. "It's him! It's really him!" squealed a young woman in a bright red parka, her phone already positioned for the perfect shot. Emmett glanced up reflexively, his gaze landing on a man moving briskly through the security corridor. Even beneath the tailored peacoat and designer sunglasses, there was no mistaking Robert Downey Jr., whose presence seemed to simultaneously compress and expand the space around him. The actor moved with purpose, nodding occasionally at fans but maintaining his trajectory toward the waiting vehicle. This was Emmett's fleeting chance, one moment of intersection between wildly divergent human paths. With a grimace of pain, he pushed himself to his feet and stepped forward, his voice failing him initially before regaining strength. "Spare some change, sir?" The words emerged more ragged than Emmett intended, carried away by the wind and the excited chatter of the crowd. He took another step, breaching the invisible barrier of security's comfort zone. Immediately, a burly man in a dark suit moved to intercept him, hand extended in a universal gesture of halt. What happened next occurred with such fluidity that onlookers would later debate the sequence of events. Downey paused, removed his sunglasses, and raised his hand toward his security detail. The gesture, simple yet commanding, froze the security guard mid-intervention. The actor's eyes, warm and inquisitive beneath the famous arched eyebrows, locked with Emmett's weathered gaze. "Sorry, what was that?" Downey asked, his voice carrying a genuine curiosity that silenced the surrounding chatter. Emmett swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the hundreds of eyes and dozens of phone cameras now trained on him. "I asked if you might spare some change, sir," he repeated, fighting the urge to look away from the intense scrutiny. "Been a rough winter." Something flickered across Downey's face, recognition perhaps of a struggle he himself had known in different circumstances. He took a deliberate step toward Emmett, closing the distance that typically separated the famous from the forgotten. "What's your name?" The question was simple but delivered with a presence that suggested Downey actually wanted to know the answer. Emmett Thorne. The name felt strange on his lips, rarely spoken aloud these days. Most people looked through him rather than at him, addressing him with generic terms if they addressed him at all. "Emmett," Downey repeated as if testing the name's weight. "I'm Robert." He extended his hand, a gesture so normal yet so extraordinary in context that several onlookers gasped audibly. Emmett hesitated before accepting the handshake, acutely aware of his grimy nails and rough palm against the actor's manicured appearance. But Downey's grip was firm, his expression unchanged by the contact with Emmett's unwashed hand. How long have you been out here, Emmett? The question came with a subtle shift in Downey's posture, angling away from the waiting car and creating a pocket of privacy despite the public setting. 3 years on the streets, Emmett answered, surprised by his own candor. Had an apartment over in Fairmill until the building went condo. Been bouncing between shelters and, well, wherever I can since then. He gestured vaguely to the alcove where his meager possessions were bundled in a weather-beaten backpack. Downey nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than pitying, a distinction Emmett appreciated more than the actor could know. Pity was plentiful and worthless. Understanding was rare and invaluable. You look like you've got some stories to tell, Downey observed, removing his gloves and tucking them into his coat pocket. The action seemed to signal to his entourage that they'd be staying put for a moment, despite the scheduling pressures that undoubtedly awaited. Emmett laughed, a rusty sound that surprised even himself. More than most would want to hear, I expect. I'd like to hear one, Downey replied, his tone suggesting this wasn't mere celebrity charity, the performative kindness designed for watching cameras. There was something else there, a genuine curiosity, or perhaps a recognition of something familiar. The crowd had grown, drawn by the unexpected drama unfolding. Phones recorded the interaction from every angle, but Emmett focused solely on the surreal reality of standing face-to-face with one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, having what felt remarkably like a normal conversation. Well, Emmett began, shifting his weight to ease the pressure on his bad knee. I wasn't always like this. Used to be a structural engineer, specialized in historical renovations actually. Worked on the Carlington Theater restoration back in 2008. He paused, noting with surprise the spark of authentic interest in Downey's eyes. Had a condo over in Seacliff, drove a BMW, the American dream, I guess you'd call it. What happened? Downey asked quietly, the question gentle but direct. Emmett's expression clouded, the memory still painful despite the years that had passed. Accident at a site in Brookmore. Support beam failed. Wasn't my design, but I was on site that day. His hand unconsciously moved to his left leg. Crushed my knee, damaged the nerves. 3 surgeries later, I was hooked on painkillers and burning through my savings faster than the insurance payments came in. Downey's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of recognition that spoke volumes to those familiar with his own history of addiction and recovery. That's a road I know something about, he said quietly. The admission, this shared vulnerability from a man who had everything to a man who had nothing, created a strange equilibrium between them, temporarily neutralizing the vast disparities in their circumstances. Yeah, I figured you might, Emmett acknowledged. Watched your comeback from rock bottom on the Shelter TV. Always thought that was something, the way you turned it around. The compliment was sincere, unburdened by the typical fawning that celebrities encountered. A contemplative silence fell between them, broken only by the murmurs of the crowd and the distant sounds of traffic. Downey seemed to be making a decision, weighing options as he studied Emmett's face. Then, with characteristic decisiveness, he reached into his inner coat pocket. The security team tensed reflexively, but Downey merely extracted a sleek leather wallet. The watching crowd collectively leaned forward, anticipating perhaps a $50 or even $100 bill, a generous but ultimately temporary solution to Emmett's situation. What happened instead would become viral fodder within hours and change the course of Emmett's life forever. Here's what I'm thinking, Emmett, Downey said, his voice low but clear. I don't think change is what you need right now. He removed not cash but a business card, holding it between 2 fingers. This is Lloyd Kerrigan. He runs a recovery program I trust, one that helped me when I needed it. It's got housing, medical care, job training, the works. Emmett stared at the card, a complex mix of emotions crossing his weathered features. Hope and skepticism warred visibly on his face. I've got a car and driver who can take you there right now if you want, Downey continued, gesturing toward a second vehicle that had pulled up behind the Escalade. No cameras, no publicity stunt. Just a chance, if you're ready for one. The crowd, sensing something significant was transpiring, had fallen unusually quiet. Phones still recorded, but a collective understanding seemed to spread that they were witnessing something beyond the typical celebrity encounter. Emmett's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the card. Why? The question was barely audible, laden with the weight of a man who had grown accustomed to expecting nothing. Downey's response came without hesitation. Because 17 years ago, someone did the same for me when I didn't think I deserved it. He glanced at his security detail, then back to Emmett. So, what do you say? Ready for things to be different? The decision that hung in the balance represented more than just Emmett's immediate future. It embodied the possibility of redemption, the potential for second chances that most had stopped believing in, especially Emmett himself. The card in his hand felt impossibly light for the weight of opportunity it represented. Behind Downey, his assistant checked her watch nervously, a subtle reminder of the tightly scheduled world to which the actor would soon return. But for this suspended moment, two men from vastly different universes occupied the same space, connected by the shared experience of having lost everything and the fragile hope of rebuilding. Emmett's gaze shifted from the card to the waiting car, then back to Downey's expectant face. The crowd held its collective breath, unconsciously understanding that they were witnessing a pivotal moment in a stranger's life. I've tried before, Emmett admitted, his voice rough with emotion. Rehab, programs, they never stuck. This one's different, Downey assured him. And you've got something you didn't have those other times. What's that? The actor smiled, a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Me checking in to make sure you're doing the work. He extended his hand again. So, we have a deal? As Emmett reached out to shake Downey's hand for the second time that day, camera flashes erupted around them, capturing the moment that would soon be shared across social media platforms worldwide. But neither man was performing for the cameras. The connection between them transcended the spectacle, rooted in a mutual understanding of how quickly life could unravel and how hard-won second chances truly were. Deal, Emmett said firmly, his voice stronger than it had been in months. What happened next would stun the onlookers and eventually captivate millions online. Instead of the perfunctory handshake everyone expected, Downey pulled Emmett into a brief but genuine embrace, the kind shared between equals rather than a celebrity and a homeless man. The security team shifted uncomfortably, but Downey paid them no mind. As they separated, Downey kept one hand on Emmett's shoulder. The car's waiting. My guy Felix will take you directly to Lloyd. I've got this premiere thing I can't skip, but I'll call Lloyd tomorrow to check in. He paused, his expression serious. This is the real deal, Emmett. No strings, no cameras once you're in the car. Just a chance if you want it. Emmett nodded slowly, the magnitude of the moment sinking in. I want it, he confirmed, his voice steadier than before. With a final nod, Downey signaled to a well-dressed man standing beside the second vehicle, who immediately approached. After a brief introduction, Emmett was escorted toward the waiting car, his few possessions collected from the alcove by another member of Downey's team. The crowd began to disperse, many already sharing their videos and photos of the encounter, but a few lingered, watching as Emmett Thorne, invisible to most of them just minutes earlier, was treated with a dignity that had long been absent from his life. As Downey prepared to continue to his original destination, a young reporter pushed forward, microphone extended eagerly. Mr. Downey, that was an incredible moment. Can you tell us what inspired such generosity? Is this part of a new charitable initiative? The actor paused, considering the question with uncharacteristic seriousness. It wasn't generosity, he finally replied. It was recognition. We're all just one bad decision or stroke of bad luck away from needing someone to see us, really see us, when we're at our worst. With that cryptic statement, he donned his sunglasses and slipped into the waiting Escalade, leaving the reporter and remaining onlookers to wonder at the deeper implications of what they had witnessed. But while the public dissected the encounter online, alternately praising Downey's compassion and questioning his motives, Emmett Thorne sat silently in the back seat of a luxury sedan, clutching a business card that represented more than just addiction recovery. It symbolized the rarest of commodities for a man in his position, a future worth imagining. As the car navigated through Westbrook's busy streets, Emmett gazed out at the city that had been both his home and his prison for the past 3 years. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he allowed himself to feel something dangerous. Hope. The sedan turned onto the highway, carrying Emmett toward whatever awaited him at Lloyd Kerrigan's recovery center. Behind them, Aldridge Square continued its holiday bustle, the spot where Emmett had stood for countless hours already reclaimed by the flow of pedestrians. But the ripples from that brief encounter between a homeless man and a Hollywood star were just beginning to spread, touching lives in ways neither man could yet imagine.